One of the most bitter moments in Jewish history was the moment we lost the great tzaddik, the great king, Yoshiyahu HaMelech. One of the most poignant statements in Jewish history is the words that the Navi Yirmiyahu heard Yoshiyahu whispering in his last moments after he went to battle against Paro Necho, who was trying to cross Eretz Yisrael to fight the nation of Ashur. And Yoshiyahu mistakenly believed that the Torah says, V'cherev lo savor ba'artzachem, you stop other nations from going through Eretz Yisrael, even if they're not fighting against you. Yoshiyahu went to fight Paro Necho. He lost. He was shot by many arrows, described graphically, sadly, in the Gemara. And then Yirmiyahu was concerned that maybe in his last moments Yoshiyahu was turning against Hashem. He bent down and heard Yoshiyahu whisper, Tzadik hu Hashem, kifihu marisi. It was I who went against Hashem. I had it all figured out. I knew all the answers. Klal Yisrael was doing the right thing. We had it all worked out. There's one thing we failed to do. To ask Yirmiyahu if it was the right thing to do and listen to his response. Because we as Klal Yisrael are so strong, so great, so exceptional, we have a hard time listening to our leaders. We have a hard time looking up to our leaders. We have a hard time being receptive. We have a hard time being obeying. I personally was extremely fortunate growing up as a young person in Borough Park, in Camp Aguda, where I learned that Agudas Yisrael is not an organization. Agudas Yisrael is Klal Yisrael. Agudas Yisrael is allowing our leaders to guide us in every aspect of our existence, to follow what they say, whether we understand, whether we agree. That is Agudas Yisrael. That is Klal Yisrael. It's the organization, if you would call it that. Could you call it an organization if it's that led by Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zechron Levracha, Rav Gifta, Zechron Levracha, the Kapushnitzer Rebbe, the Bluzhever Rebbe? We're very, very proud that in our school we have such a wonderful program about Gedolei Yisrael, which many, many students participate in. Inculcating them with the love that we must have for the leaders of Klal Yisrael, with the importance of looking up to our leaders and understanding that that is the only way Klal Yisrael can address its needs and rise to its challenges. When Rabbi Zweibel was a young man, he had a very, very brilliant future ahead of him because he was not only a respectable Talmid Chacham, but he was and is a brilliant lawyer. And he could have easily been making 6 figures and 7 figures because he was so outstanding until he got the call from Rabbi Scherer and he was asked to join the Aguda, and he decided, as a hero of our age, to become one of our leaders and represent the Gedolei Yisrael and speak for us in his extraordinary ability to articulate, with his brilliant assessment of issues and his ability to express our stand on behalf of Klal Yisrael to the world. So he's a hero because he gave up so much of what he could have had in pleasure and luxury because he saw that Klal Yisrael needed to understand what Agudas Yisrael is. And rising in the ranks, it was no surprise to anyone that eventually he rose to become the leader of our organization. It is a great, great kavod for us that Rabbi Zweibel is here tonight to address our graduates and allow us to listen in. Many people ask me, well, who is he related to? Or how did you get him to come down? I said, don't you know? This is Bais Yaakov of Baltimore. Do they deserve any less? So when I called Rabbi Zweibel, I said, would you like to come and speak at our graduation? He said, yes, unless there's a conflict with the Simcha, I'll come. He is here. It is a tremendous kavod for me to welcome him to the podium and to thank him for coming to address us and speak to the girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Zweig. The Shus, the Choshev Rabbanim who are here, grandparents, parents, and of course, the Orchei HaKavod, the graduates themselves. It's really a very special honor to be here. Parents, graduates. Our first speaker this evening, Ms. Mintz, as the valedictorian, said a very profound thought which made an impact on me and reminded me of something that occurred as Klal Yisrael was about to cross over into Eretz Yisrael, and they were hearing their last words from Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu gathers Klal Yisrael, and he says to them, "Vayikra Moshe el Kol Yisrael vayomer aleihem, Atem ri'isem, you have seen Klal Yisrael. Es kol asher asa Hashem le'einechem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Everything that Hashem has done in front of your very eyes in the land of Mitzrayim. L'farai, u'l'chol avodav, u'l'chol artzai. You saw that with your own eyes. You saw hamasais hagdalos asher ra'u einecha. The great, incredible miracles, signs that your eyes saw. Ha'isais v'amayfsim hagdalim ha'heim. And this is something that you saw now for 40 years in the Midbar. V'loi nasan Hashem lachem leiv loda'as, v'einayim lirois, v'yoznayim lishmaya, ad hayom hazeh. And Hashem did not give within you the eyes, the ears, the heart, to hear, to appreciate, to understand, until today. You've been living within a miracle. We're standing here at a transitional moment. I'm bidding farewell to you. You will cross over into Eretz Yisrael. All of the hanhaga of the leadership that HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed for Klal Yisrael all these years, and the special nisim that was part of your daily existence, was something that somehow you never appreciated. Ad hayom hazeh. Because Yom Hazeh, the day of your graduation, the day when parents can pause and reflect and think back, the 18 years, or whatever it was, filled with masais gedailos, incredible things that happen on a daily basis. Having the privilege of raising a child, of being a shutaf with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shlosha shutfim ba'adam, of entering into this partnership with Hashem and being given the responsibility and the privilege and the challenge of raising a child who will be faithful to Hashem and faithful to the Jewish people. It's an enormous challenge. It's an incredible privilege. And day in and day out, you saw miracles in front of your eyes as your child was growing. Miracles. You may not have recognized them. You're in the thick of things. But ultimately, at the moment of transition, at the time when something is about to happen, that young child who didn't know the difference between right and left when she entered school is now graduating high school and knows not only the difference between right and left, but between right and wrong. And all of the tsar gidul banim, or in this case banos, that you may have had in raising the child and the challenges, to look today at what you see in front of you. Tonight is the night when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you the leiv ladas, the einayim lirois, the oznayim lishmaya, to understand, to appreciate, and as Ms. Mintz said, to say thank you. Thank you to Hashem. Thank you for giving us the special privilege of raising a Bais Yisrael, of being your partner. The graduates, as well as the parents, are at a moment of transition. But these are years, graduates, that will be precious to you throughout your lives. The friendships that you have made during these years of growing up together, of poking fun at teachers together, of playing together, of laughing together, and even occasionally of crying together. Those relationships will remain with you for all of your life. I remember very tragically when a classmate of mine, a high school classmate of mine, about 15 years ago was nifter, had a sudden heart attack. And I went to his levaya, and I hadn't been close with him in particular, but I remembered him from high school. We had a lot of good times together. And it was like a class reunion. And I hadn't seen some of these people, some of my classmates, for so many years. And they hadn't seen me, and they hadn't seen the niftar either. But somehow the bonds that are created by your shared experience during these years are bonds that will remain with you forever and ever. And it's not just the personal friendships that you have developed. It's also the foundations that you have learned. The lessons you have learned. And I don't just mean the classes and the knowledge that you have gathered. But you've learned something, you've learned a little bit about what it means to be part of the culture of Klal Yisrael. What I'll call the culture of Bais Yaakov. The culture of tznius. The culture of sheker hachein vehevel hayofi, isha yiras Hashem hitisala. A culture that focuses on that which is internal, not external. A culture that is so foreign to the world around us today, that is so distant from the world around us today, where everything is focused on the external. Sheker hachein, what are you talking about? Hevel hayofi, please. Yiras Hashem tisalo. That's the society that we are part of. That's the society in which we have to retain a totally different culture. The culture of Bais Yaakov, the culture of tznius, the culture of Yiras Hashem hitishala. Ralph the custodian saw it. He saw what was going on in this school. He knows there's something special. Something very special about the way you were raised, about the lessons you absorbed, about the types of people you have become. A person who lives his lifestyle in accordance with the values of Torah, even when surrounded by a secular world whose values are entirely the opposite of the Torah values, will look and will see and will respect and will admire. That's the lesson Ralph taught you. I learned a similar lesson a few years ago, and I've told this story because it's one of my favorite stories about my work at the Aguda. And if you've heard it, I apologize, but I wanted to share it with the graduates. It's a story that happened about 8 or 9 years ago when the New York State Education Department put out a brand new law, a new regulation that would have had a very, very negative impact on many of the yeshivos and Bais Yaakovs across New York State. And the Rosh HaYeshiva got together and they asked me if I would speak to the Commissioner of Education in New York State, a gentleman with whom I had a good relationship, and see if I could persuade him in some way to modify these regulations. So I made a luncheon appointment to see him. I invited him up to my office. His name was Richard Mills. So Mr. Mills came to the office, and he lives in Albany. My office is in Manhattan. And so of course, you start off with a little small talk, and I said, Rick, tell me, when did you get into town? He says, I got in last night. I said, really, where do you stay when you come to New York, to the city? He said, I stayed in the Brooklyn Marriott. And you know, I saw a very interesting thing. I said, really, what did you see? He said, you know, I checked into my room, and then I went downstairs to the lounge, and I looked at it, and I saw that at a table there, table for two, there was a young man dressed in a dark suit and a white shirt and a nice tie and wearing a black hat. And across from him was sitting this young lady, and they were involved in a very serious conversation. Then I looked at the next table. And there was this young man in a dark suit with a black hat sitting across from a young lady, and they were involved in a very serious conversation. And I looked around the room, and there were about half a dozen tables where this was taking place. So when he told me this, I started to get a little bit nervous. And I said, so what did you think about that, Rick? He said, you know, at first I was taken aback. That's not the sort of thing you see every day. But then I thought to myself, that's the way it should be done. Do you know how many problems we have here in New York, he told me? I'm the commissioner of education. Children who are in school, they come from dysfunctional families. They don't know who their fathers are. If we could only have a system where families were real families, children grew up in a loving, nurturing environment. If we would only have a system where courtship was taken seriously, if we would only do it like you do it, half the problems that we have in this state would just go out of the way. If I was successful that day in having the regulation amended so that it would no longer have the negative impact on the yeshivos and the Bais Yaakovs in New York, it had very little to do, I assure you, with my persuasive powers, with the precedents I cited, with the legal arguments. It had everything to do with the insight that Ralph the custodian had, which Richard Mills, the commissioner of education, had. He saw something. He saw something very special. Even in today's world, where the culture of society is so foreign to us, if we conduct ourselves the way we're supposed to, if we conduct ourselves with the dignity of kol kavuda bas melech penima, of tznius, and tznius, of course, as you've learned, has a lot to do with how you dress, but it has a lot to do with so much more. And tznius is not just for women. Tznius is for our community. We live in a society, as we learned in Pirkei Avos this past Shabbos, Al Tomar Davar She'i Efshar Lishmoa Shesofo Lihishama. There's no such thing as a Davar She'i Efshar Lishmoa today, as a private little matter. With the technological advances of society, and with the ability to spread rumors, gossip, whatever you'd like, lashon hara, rechilus, with the mere press of a button. Al Tomar davar she'i efshar lishmoa. There's no such thing as a davar she'i efshar lishmoa. Sofo lihishama. We live in a society which is the opposite of tzanua. We live in a society where everything is broadcast all over. Every little flaw is magnified, distorted, everything. And yet somehow, even within that culture, and even within that society that we exist today, there's room for us to create Kiddush Hashem through the way that we act and conduct ourselves, not by showing that we're just like the rest of the world, but by showing that Torah elevates us, makes us something special, something different. There's a story which I've seen, I've also said it over a number of times, and I've seen it attributed to various Gedolei Yisrael first time I heard it, it was attributed to the Baal HaTanya. So I'll tell it to you b'shem the Baal HaTanya. The Baal HaTanya was once the victim of a malshinus, of people who had tattled against him and turned him over to the government for some perceived crime, and he was put in jail. So he was there, he put on his talis and tefillin, and he was davening. And as he was davening, behind him walked the warden of the jail. And the Baal HaTanya was faced in this direction, and the warden came up behind him and said, "Jew, turn around." But the Baal HaTanya was in the midst of his davening, and he continued davening. So the warden raised his voice louder and started cursing and threatening and screaming, "Turn around!" Until the Baal HaTanya finally finished his tefillah and turned around. And the warden saw the Baal HaTanya and walked away. Chassid had seen this, what had transpired, and he went over to the Rebbe and he said, "Rebbe, what happened? How is it that when you turned around after he was cursing you and threatening you and screaming, you just walked away? What happened?" So the Baal HaTanya answered. The pasuk is darshaned in the Gemara. The Gemara says, "V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha v'yaru mimeka." V'ra'u kol amei ha'aretz ki shem Hashem nikra alecha. The nations of the world will see that the name of Hashem is upon you. V'yaru mimeka, and they will fear you. So what is ki shem Hashem nikra alecha referred to, says the Gemara? Elu tefillin shebarosh. That refers to the tefillin shebarosh. So I turned around, he saw the tefillin shebarosh, v'yaru mimeka. He was scared, he walked away. So the chassid said, "Aber Rebbe, how come it doesn't work for me? How come when I walk in the street and I'm wearing my tefillin, not only don't the anti-Semites run away from me, they throw stones, they spit, they scream. It's a chazal. I'm wearing my tefillin." So the Rebbe answered, maybe we have to look carefully at the words of the chazal. It doesn't say, "Elu tefillin she'al haraish," the tefillin that are on the head. "Elu tefillin she'biraish," the tefillin that are within the head. As long as our actions, the tefillin that we wear, the long dresses that we wear, the early leaving time on Friday during the winter months, the insistence on eating only kosher food, all the different Maaseh HaMitzvah that set us apart from the rest of the world, if they remain simply al harosh, external to us, without penetrating birosh within ourselves, then that doesn't lead to v'yaru mimeka. That doesn't create Kiddush Hashem. That won't get Ralph the custodian to say anything nice, or Richard Mills to say that's the way it's supposed to be done. Because then, on the contrary, you hold yourselves out as being holier than thou than the rest of the world, but you're just the same as the rest of the world. Since when will that inspire respect? Tefillin have to penetrate birosh. People have to look at us, see that we are an elevated Am Hashem, the Am HaNivchar, Yisrael Asher B'cha Espa'ar. Hashem is glorified through the actions of Klal Yisrael. Shetei Shem Shamayim Misahev Al Yodecha. That is the ultimate purpose that Hashem has sent us down to this earth. That is the foundation upon which your future is built. That is the foundation that you have acquired in this outstanding school. Bais Yaakov of Baltimore is known far and wide. If one judges invitations to speak at various functions on the basis not of geography, but on the basis of quality, there is virtually, and I don't know whether I needed to say the word virtually, no invitation that is more chashuv and more honorable for a person like myself than the invitation I received to speak to you tonight. Because that's what the quality of Bais Yaakov of Baltimore is. And that is the foundation that you will take with you throughout your lives. There's a Chassidish Taich on the Pasuk that when Avraham Avinu was given his ultimate nisayon, the nisayon of the Akedah, the Pasuk says, Vayikach es shnei na'ara v'ito. He took along his two young ones with him. And the Chassidish Taich is, Vayikach es shnei na'ara v'ito. He took along with him the years of his youth. When you face the nisyonos of life, young ladies, you will be taking with you Shnei Na'arav, the years of your youth, the foundations you have developed here in Beis Yaakov. Lama Nigara, the Benot Slavcha said. Lama Nigara will be what you say as well. Yes, we live in a very challenging time. We live in a society whose values are so antithetical to ours. But at the same time, Lama Nigara, we will not be any less than that which we can be, than that which we learn we need to be, than that which our moros, our teachers, have taught us through these years in Beis Yaakov, and that which will equip us to face every challenge and promote Kiddush Hashem and Kvod Shamayim in every step of our lives. Thank you very much.